Brought to you by Charity Mobile. Switch to the phone company that supports your beliefs. All plans start under $50 before taxes and surcharges. Use promo code TRADITION at CharityMobile.com for a special offer.
The subject of free speech is now possibly the most hot-button topic of all topics in the culture today. We've seen this in the aftermath of what happened to Charlie Kirk. Suddenly, free speech is something everyone is debating. And you're now hearing conservatives talk about essentially consequence culture, practically using that term, a term coined by the secular left in the last decade, whenever people who liked the current president would say things that the left deemed unacceptable. And so they would then go after those who were supporters of the president or people who were just not hostile to the president for speaking things the left found uncomfortable and offensive. And guess what they would do? They would make them lose their employment, get them kicked off social media, and all the rest of it. We are all familiar with this if we've lived in the past decade in the West. In the last couple of weeks, the right has decided they've had enough since the left have decided to go beyond just government power, but direct action in the form of violence, and are now using those same tactics against the left. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And this has caused a huge debate. But I'm going to bet the story I'm going to tell you today, many of you who are traditional Catholics or traditionally minded conservative Catholics, you won't feel that much sympathy for the priest I'm going to tell you about today. That is my bet. I do not believe anybody who is essentially got Orthodox Catholic views on things should get canceled for even saying deeply troubling things when it comes to certain historic narratives and things. And I don't agree with Father Mawdsley on this topic at hand. I know I've seen the arguments. It's not something I'm interested in, honestly. But in general, it's not something it's a topic I have any desire to really delve into. It is the third rail of public discourse. But he grabbed both hands on that third rail. And that does take some courage to do. Whatever else you may say of him, you cannot call the man a coward. He went after that, and now he's paying the consequence. We're talking here about Father James Mawdsley. This is his bio from Courageous Clergy. Father James Rupert Russell Mawdsley is a Catholic priest formerly of the FSSP. Prior to seminary, he was a prisoner of conscience in Burma. He is a dual citizen of the United Kingdom and Australia. From 2016 to 2022, Mawdsley was a Catholic priest of the FSSP, having studied to become a priest at the FSSP seminary at Wittenberg in Germany. My apologies for my pronunciation. He was ordained to the priesthood on the 2nd of July, 2016, and was assistant priest at St. Mary's Church, Warrington in Cheshire, England, through October 2017. From November 2017 through August 2018, he was assigned to the FSSP apostolate in Reading, Berkshire, where he served the Latin Mass centers of Bedford and Chesham Boy. In September 2018, Mawdsley was assigned to the FSSP apostolate in Vienna, Austria. From October 2020 until April 2021, Mawdsley was assigned to the FSSP apostolate in Cologne, Federal Republic of Germany. In response to Pope Francis's promulgation of his motu proprio Traditionis Custodes on the 16th of July 2021, restricting the use of the traditional Mass, and the 18th December 2021 clarification on its implementation, released by Bishop Arthur Roach, prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments, Mawdsley informed his superiors in the FSSP of his intention to leave the fraternity in order to be able to speak out against the motu proprio without fear of reprisal from church authorities. He essentially became independent. That's not what people are going to have a hard time with. This got posted to X by Dave Riley. If you're familiar with him, he is, I believe, last time I ever spoke with him, because I have in the past, he would consider himself a dissident right political figure. He's also a Catholic, a traditional Catholic, award-winning independent radio host, independent journalist, Catholic. He calls himself an ethicist, e-celeb. He considers himself America First, all that kind of thing. He posted this. X has suspended the account of Catholic priest Father Mawdsley. Attached, and you can click here, account suspended. Attached is a message he got from him just a few months ago. And he's asking Elon Musk to restore him. I don't think that's going to happen. This is a message from Father Mawdsley. I just got notified that my X account has been suspended. Seems I got reported for saying the evil thing that happened to our so-called elder brothers in the faith at the hands of the bad guys in World War II was a fabrication. Would you mind posting the attached screenshot so people know why I've disappeared? I might try appealing it, but I don't have much confidence in that. Thanks if you can help. At least life will be more peaceful without X. Oremus pro inventum. Father James. And of course, there's a screenshot. Particularly for violating against our rules against harassment and abuse, he may not engage in targeted harassment. And of course, he was sharing an article about what's going on in the Holy Land, comparing it to things happening in World War II and how he didn't believe what was happening in World War II. And that's the reason he got canceled. I don't support him getting canceled for that, even if I disagree with what he's saying. But many of you will. Guarantee it. Many of you will. Let me know in the comments if you think he deserved it. I'm very curious. And if you see comments like that, don't go after the people, please. That's not what we're here for. But he got canceled for that. And this happened at a time when free speech is the trending topic of the day. Progressives suddenly coming out claiming they're for free speech when they're, they got more mad about a late night host that virtually nobody watched. We're talking 100, he got 125,000 views per broadcast. There are YouTubers who get more than that per their live streams. To give you an idea, there are YouTubers who are actively suppressed by YouTube who get more views than that per live stream. He was going to get fired anyway. This was probably the excuse. Now, he may be back. Disney's kind of waffling a little bit on that, but the signs are he's going to be gone. But the left got more mad about that than they did about somebody using violence to essentially end debate. Breathtaking what they did. But that's the debate going on right now, is free speech. So the question is, not a rhetorical one, let me know in the comments. Does Father Mawdsley, do you believe, have the right to discuss those things? And should he face consequences for it from social media platforms? Yes or no? Especially ones whose owner, since he bought the place 2 years ago, has dedicated himself to mostly free speech. He basically said he was going to allow most things to be discussed if it was done civilly, as long as it didn't incite people to do evil things. Couldn't, break the law on the platform. He couldn't do things like organize activities for breaking the law through the platform. You couldn't share certain kinds of impure things, although many of us would rather that Elon Musk banned all forms of impure imagery on the platform. That would make the place much nicer to be. But as a general rule, he has said he's supporting mostly free speech. But the track record has been that a lot of voices have been canceled on that platform, on our side of things. Strange. Now, it's also happened to a lot of people on the left. If people were out there cheering for the ending of Charlie Kirk and then losing their platforms, it's hard to be against that, what happened. But when they start coming out and saying they want more of that, well, at that point, that's trying to incite people. Most people would agree that at that point, they lose their voice. But do you think Father Mawdsley was in the wrong? I'm curious. As Bellator says, they celebrate a podcast influencer's death, but they detest a comedy show's cancellation. These people have no common sense, no basic ethics, no morality. Right. So for example, if what happened to Charlie Kirk happened to someone on the other side, and God forbid, please pray that doesn't happen. We don't want that to happen. I wouldn't cheer for it. That would be a horrible thing. But you have to ask yourself, would this be treated the same? That's what happened to Father Mawdsley. And I don't think he deserved to be canceled for having an opinion that every time he posts about it, his reply section is full of people going after him. If you say something ugly on social media, you can be prepared to do it. If you, as someone with a Twitter account, want to block somebody for saying something you don't like, that's one thing. But to have the platform host do it, this is an issue that is particularly close to my heart because of all the weird words I have to use to get around the stupid rules on this place. So you understand, this is a personal issue for me. I want Father Mawdsley to be able to say things I disagree with without repercussion. Now, Roseanne says she's on Father Mawdsley's side. He's a holy priest. Everything I've seen from him because I've watched a few of his things, his podcasts and things on other topics, and he seems to be a He seems to be good on most things. Napoleon asks, does he deny the big evil event of World War II? Yes, he does. Or he says it's not exactly what we're told. There's a whole range of views that get lumped under the umbrella of that title, and I don't think most of that's actually fair. It's just lumping everything in to under one category, but he is, generally speaking. But I don't think he deserves to be canceled for it. Now, Kat says he's not. See, this is where it's more complicated than that, right? It's not just, oh, it didn't happen. There's like a range of views people have that go against the official narrative. And that's the part that's the most troubling. In a free society, you are free to reject the official narrative of things. I, for example, reject the official narrative of Vatican II. Shocker of shocks, in case you're new here. But I reject the official narrative of it and have for years. Because it's clear that what we were told happened at the council and after is nonsense. And there are Catholic voices. There are Catholic leaders who would like to silence people like us, telling us to zip it. Bay State says, is free speech absolutism condemned by Blessed Pius IX's syllabus of errors, as in errors and rights and such? Yes, absolutism is. For example, a free speech absolutist will allow you to say blasphemous things. Thinks blasphemy should be legal, right? And as a traditional Catholic, I don't think people have the right to blaspheme our Lord's name and to foster an environment where that's normal. Hate me for that if you want, but, that puts me as a fundamentalist, rigid clericalist. But such is the environment we are in. War Priest says X has banned more people than Twitter ever did. Twitter required a complainant. X uses AI to police. That is true. That is the advance of technology. Though I will say that I'm glad the AI systems that X uses now weren't around under Twitter, because they would have absolutely used those to much more vicious effect. Bella Cruz says, I used to watch Father Mawdsley quite often. I liked his traditionalism, although there are issues that I do not agree with. No, I do not believe he should have been canceled for his opinions. That is exactly what I believe. Donald Morgan says, allowing a different opinion, even on controversial topics, should be allowed as long as one is not inciting violence. Father Mawdsley should be allowed to post. Yeah. That's generally my attitude about it. Now, Raven Ray says, free speech is for the right to speak the truth. Right, and to discern the truth, you have to hear multiple sides of a story, even on unsavory topics. In fact, especially on unsavory topics. So he got banned. I'd love to know the reasoning why, and I don't think X is going to ever tell us. Now I'm going to show you a priest or bishop who will never be canceled. He says, I think, just as offensive stuff. I learned from katholisch.de. Bishop Botzing, that multicolored evil flag on the Reichstag would have been good. The Reichstag is the German parliament. Okay, you may have heard that term in relation to World War II. But in this case, that's not what he's talking about here. One of the top officials in the German government just neglected to put the flag of our elevated betters. Those you're not allowed to criticize anywhere without severe repercussions. He or she refused to put that on there. And the bishop, who is the president of the German Bishops' Conference, was very upset about this. Wrap your head around that one. Except if you're familiar with Bishop Botzing, you should not be surprised. Details from the official news arm of the German Bishops' Conference. The Catholic Bishop of Limburg, Georg Botzing, criticized Bundestag President Julia Klockner for not allowing that evil flag to be raised on the Reichstag on Christopher Street Day. I think it's a shame that she rejected it this year, he said. He was also chairman of the German Bishops' Conference in an interview with Stern magazine. It would have been a good sign. I say this consciously as a Catholic bishop. Botzing was alluding to his church's traditionally negative attitude towards the James Martin way of living. The Catholic Catechism states that practicing that is, quote, intrinsically not right and should not be condoned under any circumstances, the bishop said. He calls for a correction. That activity is not a sin, Georg Botzing, Bishop of Limburg, who is in good standing with the church, said. We said in the synodal path that we want to change that. Other parts of the catechism have also been changed, for example, regarding capital punishment, end quote. He is someone who will never be canceled. Pope Leo was never going to cancel him. Francis didn't. The Vatican, at Francis's direction, sent multiple warnings to the German bishops, handing them to Georg Botzing, telling him not to continue on their heretical synodal way. And their warning was, don't do this alone, go with the rest of the church, which is a markedly different thing than telling them to stop. And he's still the bishop. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he became an archbishop somewhere and then given a red hat and made a cardinal. He will never get treated the way Father Mawdsley has. Now, I want to give you a little bit of good news before we go into some negative news. A couple things happened at the Charlie Kirk Memorial yesterday that I found interesting. Very interesting indeed. Go to Breedale on X, who posts this. Spotted at Charlie Kirk's memorial, Bishop Robert Barron. Bishop Barron has been, which doesn't do it justice, and I'll have to mute this, but you can see him right there. Now, Bishop Barron said something sensible about what happened to Charlie Kirk, and more power to him for that. Good on him for that, unequivocally. And he ended up getting shredded on social media for that. How dare you, Bishop Barron, from his target audience. How dare you, Charlie Kirk was a bad man. You know, that kind of stuff. He was at the memorial. That's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. He was one of the more sensible voices on this. And this other thing, this post by Nick Sorter on X, breaking, Elon Musk is now sitting with the president at Charlie Kirk's memorial. Charlie managed to bring the two of them back together. You may not be aware of this, but they had a falling out some time ago over immigration things and taxes and other things, and specifically Doge and the unwillingness of the government to make the cuts needed to balance the budget. And now it looks like, at least for there, they were being cordial. My hope is that Elon Musk apologized to the president's face, and then they can move on together to achieve the mutual ends. That's my hope. I'm not too hopeful about it, but that's my hope. Wanted to start there because yesterday some bad news broke. We have news out of the Diocese of Monterey that a traditional Latin Mass, as one of the final acts of a bishop going into retirement, the traditional Latin Mass community is going to get shut down. The question I have is why? Why couldn't he just leave it to his successor? His successor could have done it within a few months. There is a theory floating around right now that the liturgy office in Rome is essentially guiding a lot of these closures of the Latin Mass, and that in this case they asked the outgoing bishop to do it. That is extraordinarily troubling if that's the case, because that would mean that this is essentially being done under the tacit approval of Pope Leo XIV, who had said in his recent interview that he has spent virtually no time on the matter, which also suggests that when he and Cardinal Burke met, they didn't talk about the traditional Mass, not in any detail anyway. So we go here to Rorate Caeli, under the headline, Outgoing Bishop Kills the Traditional Latin Mass in Monterey, California. Poor Catholics of Austin, Texas. A little confusing language there from Rorate Caeli, but we'll show you what they mean. The bishop's on his way out, and he did that. Didn't have to. He could have left it to his successor. One wonders why he chose to do it on his way out. And for those who may not be that familiar, first and foremost, the concept of a bishop emeritus, a bishop retiring, is a post-conciliar, post-Vatican II novelty. Bishops would do their job as a bishop until they physically could not do so anymore. The same with priests. They would be priests until they physically could not do so anymore. And then they're still a priest or a bishop, but they would still do their duties as a priest or a bishop until they could not do so anymore. Now they're retired, but how many times have you gone to confession at a typical ordinary form parish somewhere and found that your priest, the priest hearing your confession, was clearly older, maybe you've caught a glimpse of him, was clearly past retirement age. Sometimes offering masses at parishes. They're retired, in quotes. They live in a community for retired priests, typically, but they go spend their days traveling around offering masses. It's a very strange thing. There's a vocations crisis, and you'd think that you would want these priests to be around just for managerial reasons. Now, the The flip side of that is the generation of priests retiring right now are overwhelmingly bad. These are the guys who you go and confess, say, sixth and ninth commandment sin. And they will say, well, it's a habit. It's not a big deal, right? Those guys, those priests. So in a way, seeing them retire, it's not a bad thing. But it's a post-Vatican II novelty, both priests and bishops doing this. And it makes me wonder if this bishop did this to spare his successor a negative start to his episcopate. Bishop Daniel Garcia was named by Leo XIV for the huge diocese of the Texan capital, Austin, in July, transferred to Monterey, California, to which he had been named by Francis in 2018. As a parting gift to the faithful of Monterey, he decided to end the 17-year-old traditional Latin Mass in the diocese. Could something be more petty, more pathetic, and more ridiculous? The last Mass will be on October 13th. Feast of Our Lady of Fatima. Hooray! Here's hoping they get a more compassionate bishop in his place. Meanwhile, Austin Catholics, whose old TLM of the cathedral had already been axed, prepare yourselves. This promises to be an inauspicious time. And then the document was sent to Orate Caeli. And we'll go over the whole document here. Notification to the community in attendance of the Latin Mass in Hollister. Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, as many of you know, several months ago, I sent Chancellor Deacon David Ford and the director of the tribunal, Miss Cecilia Brennan, to meet with you in Hollister after a celebration of the pre-conciliar Mass at Sacred Heart Church. This was to provide advice for me as I discern the best path forward for the church in Monterey, and most especially to be in conformance with the direction of the Dicastery of Divine Worship and Sacraments in accordance with the motu proprio of the Holy Father Traditionis Custodes. The primary focus of every bishop is stated in Vatican Council II documents, and of course of Pope Francis as well as Pope Leo, is to lead the church toward unity. And of course the heart of our faith, that which nourishes our faith and unity in our worship. So it is that the foundational principle for us is our unity in the celebration of the Eucharist and all the sacraments. Pope Francis addressed the rare situation in which the Church finds herself at this time of having two liturgies being celebrated in one Latin rite. I'm going to pause here because it's such a ridiculous statement. Do you know how many different variations of the liturgy there are in the Latin rite? Tons of them. You ever heard of the Ambrosian rite? That is a Western rite. That is a Roman rite. Archbishop Vigano offered that for decades. Ever heard of the Carmelite use? You ever heard of the Dominican use? Practically rites within their own right, so to speak. There are two rites within what? This is how little these people know about the liturgy. So it is our foundational principle for us is our unity in the celebration of the Eucharist and all the sacraments. Pope Francis addressed the rare situation the Church finds herself at this time of having two liturgies celebrated in the one Latin rite. The principles that must be applied are those of the motu proprio Traditionis Custodes, as well as principles articulated in his letter to the bishops of the whole world that accompanied the motu proprio. In addressing this necessary unity in worship, Pope Francis reminded all that the liturgical books promulgated by Pope St. Paul VI and Pope St. John Paul II constitutes the unique expression of the lex orandi of the Roman rite. The Holy Father stated, whoever wishes to celebrate with devotion according to the earlier forms of the liturgy can find in the Reformed Roman Missal, according to Vatican Council II, all the elements of the Roman rite. Elsewhere in the letter, the Holy Father noted, speaking of the Mass of Pope John the 23rd, quote, the bishops gathered in ecumenical council asked that the Mass, be reformed. Their intention was that the faithful would not assist as strangers and silent spectators in the mystery of faith, but with a full understanding of the rites and prayers, would participate in the sacred action consciously, piously, and actively. Pope St. Paul VI declared the new rite is an expression of the Church's unity. Certainly, we can say this decision of Pope St. Paul VI reflected both the unanimity of the Council Fathers, as seen in the documents of the Council, and post-conciliar documents, but also the unanimity of the liturgical theologians, which advised the bishops of the Council. Pope Francis stated, the unity I intend to reestablish throughout the Church of the Roman Rite. While praying and discerning the unique situation of this matter in our diocese and desiring to support the Pope's goal of moving toward greater unity in the post-conciliar Roman Rite, I've made a decision to strengthen our unity with the universal church. One factor considered, and then you got to go back because the way they shared this. One factor considered is that a diocese, oh, hold on, let me bring this up on screen. Sorry, flying by the seat of our pants here today. Is that in a diocese of over 210,000 Catholics, meaning that's a small diocese, ladies and gentlemen. The numbers in attendance of this pre-conciliar Mass are very small indeed. There's also the matter of the pastor there at Sacred Heart and St. Benedict's being able to give his full attention to the entire parish, rather than taking his limited time spent with a small group of individuals who are not worshiping according to the ordinary and one rite of the Latin Church. Clearly, the Church is moving us to greater unity in worship. And as Archbishop Roche recalled, now Cardinal, it is the duty of the bishops cum petro et sub petro, with Peter and under Peter, to safeguard communion. He reminded the bishops that, quote, as pastors, we must not lend ourselves to sterile polemics capable of only creating division, in which the ritual itself is often exploited by ideological viewpoints. Rather, we are called to rediscover the value of the liturgical reform by preserving the truth and beauty of the rite that has been given to us. For this to happen, we are aware that a renewed and continuous liturgical formation is necessary both for priests and the lay faithful. Besides praying and reflecting on these liturgical teachings of Vatican Council II, the ecclesial principles articulated so well and mentioned above, and on the input I have received from my chancellor and direct to the tribunal after visiting the community. I also consulted with my vicar general and the Presbyterial Council. After all the above consultations and reflections, I've come to a decision for the good of the Church of Monterey, not to request a dispensation from the Dicastery for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. Meaning he's not asking for a dispensation. He is not asking for permission for the Latin Mass to continue on his way out. For the celebration of the Preconciliar Mass at Sacred Heart Parish and Church, in unity with the Holy Father's motu proprio, I have directed Father Stephen Akers to cease celebrations of the Preconciliar Mass in Hollister as of October 13th, 2025. I invite you all to join in unity with the parish of Sacred Heart and St. Benedict in cooperation with your pastor as they gather around the table of the Lord celebrating the rich Eucharistic sacrifice each Sunday, which has been a great fruit of the council. May this liturgy charge your hearts with charity and trust to build the unity Pope Leo spoke about in the Mass he celebrated early in his pontificate in St. Peter's Square. With the light and strength of the Holy Spirit, let us build a church founded on God's love, a sign of unity, a missionary church that has opened its arms to the world, proclaims the word, allows itself to be made restless by history, because a leaven of harmony for humanity. Signed by the bishop, who didn't have to do this on his way out the door to his new diocese or retirement or wherever he's going. That right there is happening and going to continue happening until Leo eventually speaks. And I don't think he's going to lift the bans on Traditionis Custodes. He's not going to. They wouldn't do this if they thought he was going to. Making some dialogue. This might be about it. Well, we're listening. The fruits of the new Mass have been pretty clear. It's one of the number one things cited by people who end up leaving the Catholic faith. It's also tiresome, but that's where we are as a church. And I would caution people, because right now you're going to see, I think, more of the unfortunate kind of thing where people are going to start talking about leaving that parish and going other places. There's probably an SSPX chapel within a 2-hour drive of there. I would bet on it. There's probably an FSSP option as well within a 2-hour drive or so. Now, for some people, 2 hours each way is a lot. My family and I make about a 2-hour drive each Sunday, each way, to get to Mass. Not everybody can do that, but I will tell you the sacrifice you make in time and treasure, because driving costs money, is something that will get you great graces. Now, I also got this letter was sent to me overnight by somebody, but I thought I'd go with the version that, or the posting of Verate Chele, just to show you that I'm not making this up. Now, I'm curious what you think about this. Do you think that I'm correct here, that this is going to cause people to probably, at the very least, go look for the traditional Mass wherever they can get it? I actually expect some of them to become sedevacantists in this. They'll go to Mass with the CMRI, they'll go to Mass with the SSPV, or who the other sedevacantist options are. That would not shock me. It's the unbridled cruelty and blasé arrogance that you see from these guys when you see these letters talking about unity in the faith, when the greatest thing undermining unity today are men like Georg Botzing or James Martin or anyone else promoting heresy, or even the Pope himself. Yes, I said it. You may not be aware, but over the weekend, Pope Leo gave an address to some ecumenical prayer meeting where he invoked quotes from one of the so-called holy books of the Ottomans, and he quoted Tikkun Olam. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Earlier talked about Father Mawdsley. He will tell you exactly what that is. It's a revolutionary idea about making a better world, materialist, false gospel. He invoked those things explicitly. If you want to know what destroys unity in the church, it is having pastors at any level in the church undermining the faith, teaching people a false gospel based on material salvation, making a better world. God, Jesus being the privileged path to salvation, God permitting any number of paths to salvation away from Christ. That's where we live right now. And one of the reasons they go after the traditional Mass is everything I just said critical of the new Mass is part of the ecclesiology of Vatican II. The traditional Mass, as its worship, as the liturgical rite of the pre-Vatican II Church, doesn't have room for that. There are prayers, at least there weren't up until 1962, in the Mass, rather explicitly condemning everything I just said about what the post-Vatican II ecclesiology is. They're two different expressions, two different forms of worship emanating from two different ecclesiologies. Ecclesiology being the theology of the church, its mission in the world. It's what the Great Commission is, its relationship to God and man's relationship to God. If you're that worried about unity in the church, you might want to start worrying about prelates at every level of the church denying what Jesus Christ said, which is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus was very clear on that. We can debate, people can debate, the need for ecumenical relations among self-described Christians who all recognize that Christ is Lord. But when it comes to outside groups, this should be unequivocal, but it's not. Because the attitude of it is, Jesus is the privileged path to salvation. I'm curious what you think of all this. Ottoman rite of the church. That's not, no, the Ottoman Empire had a religion that you can't criticize in any social media platform. I sometimes call them the crescent moon worshippers who follow a false prophet. That people. I once nearly lost my channel for saying their name explicitly in a negative way. I learned it firsthand. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Share this on social media if you like. Helps a lot too. Pray for those bishops who are banning Latin masses, and pray for everybody else we spoke about today. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.